Welcome, everyone. This is the Special Finance Committee budget meeting for Thursday, November 6, 2025. Before we begin, could I ask Councillor Gray to provide a territorial acknowledgement?
Thank you, Mayor Little. I want to acknowledge that we're meeting today and always meet on the Coast Salish territory of the and want to recognize our near neighbors, the Shannon Nation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we have an agenda before you. Are there any additions? If not, I'll take a motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have time for public participation. If anybody should wish to speak this evening, if you could provide your name and your street, you have 4 minutes. The indicator will give you a yellow flashing light when you have 30 seconds remaining. Everybody's welcome. There will be an opportunity for input later on as well. And so, yeah, you can also remind me if I forget. Let's move along then. So we have reports on page 3 of the agenda. We have a report from our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Creek. Just as a reminder, the purpose of this meeting is to review the 2026-2030 financial plan, focusing on the operational issues. We are going to be discussing capital expenditures before, but we've focused on the operational in the last 2 meetings. We want to conclude that at this meeting. Okay, if I could ask Mr. Creek to come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. There you go. Better? All right, let's try this out. Whoa, where did that go? All right, so we're going to start off answering some of those questions from the public during the last meeting. First question was about the new Beckingham subdivision and how much revenue is that going to be generating. So right now there's 2 building permits with our planning department. One's less than $1 million, one's about just over $2 million. So I ended up taking an average of 1.5 as an estimate. There's going to be 18 plots over there. That would mean roughly $27 million of improvement. And based on the 2025 tax rate, we'd be looking at somewhere around $31,000 of revenue. And she'd wondered if it was included in the estimates for the current draft financial plan. So I don't really bake that into the financial plan itself. Everything's based on operating expenses for the district and the service levels provided, and then collecting enough revenue to cover those expenses. So it's never based on what projects are being completed. So I'll end up determining the mill rate starting in January once we've received the completed roll from BC Assessment, and that's when we end up finding out what the tax rate would be. If all of that property were actually completed in 2026, which is highly unlikely, that's equivalent to roughly 1%. So if we asked for a 3% tax hike, it would go down to a 2% tax hike because of that increase in assessed value. But that's seems more likely to be a little bit in 27, a little more in 28, and hopefully completed by 2029. But I don't know when everything's actually going to be done. And so this kind of leads into the idea of, based on the budget right now in this draft financial plan, we're looking at $2.87 million. In 2025, the total assessed value of all the property in Metchosin was $2.27 billion. And so if the district's taxable assessments were the same in 2026, we need about a 3% tax increase to fund this additional amount in the budget. But if the total assessed value in the district somehow went up to $2.5 billion, taxes would actually go down by 7%, even though the budget went up. So it's just kind of playing with the numbers in that regard. Number 2, I was asked about a comparison to surrounding municipalities for taxes. And so all of this is based on the average residential home in Metchosin in 2025, which was roughly $1.2 million. And so North Saanich had the lowest total mill rate out of the 13 municipalities, with Metchosin at number 2, and then everybody goes higher from there. So Highlands is almost 10% higher, and then all the way at the bottom there with Esquimalt, which kind of surprised me, which is 58% higher than Metchosin. So if you took your Metchosin property, had the same value in any of those places, that's what you'd end up paying over in the tax payable column. And then this kind of just shows it on a different line graph. So North Saanich, then Metchosin, and then everybody else. And here's a breakdown for the actual taxes itself. So this brown looking bar on here, that's the total taxes payable, total mill rate, and then the yellow bar is the municipal portion of the rate. So in Metchosin 2025, our mill rate was 1.16625.
Question. Question.
Nope.
Through the chair. Does North Saanich get tax revenue from the airport?
Through chair? Yes, they do. They received just under $1.4 million in built, which is on par with what we received from the prison and the base.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Creek, these numbers are impressive in terms of the differences, but isn't it so that a place like Victoria or Oak Bay, they're providing a lot more services to the population, so they need more revenue?
Through chair. Correct. Yeah. It's like in that total number, right? It's like the Metchosin, we're budgeting for 5 RCMP officers. Langford's got 20 something, 30 something like that, right? Victoria would have way more than that. So it is like the comparisons to other districts, municipalities, it's never apple to apple. It's kind of different there.
But you were asked for a comparison. This
Yeah,
is a
I
comparison.
just throw it in.
Councillor Schuster.
Through you, Mayor Little. So, Mr. Creek, what you're showing us here is the residential mill rate, correct?
Through the chair. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just the residential.
And so with that, just again, it's good to put this in perspective, but some of the other information you've shown us before shows how significant the residential component of our tax base is, and how insignificant industrial commercial is as well. So it's
I think he's
correct
I think he's going to get to that.
Yeah.
Let's let him continue.
So through chair, as Jay was indicating, the residential portion here in Metchosin is higher than any other municipality in the CRD. So of that $2.27 billion of assessment, 98.43% belongs to residential properties. 0.62% is business, 0.09% is light industrial, 0.75% is recreation, nonprofit, 0.05% is farm. The only people close to us is the District of Oak Bay. They're at 98.08%, and their residential tax rate is 42% higher than Metchosin. And then explaining why North Saanich manages to have a lower tax rate for residential properties than Metchosin. You can see on their line there, their total assessed value, 5.7% belongs to business, and then 0.5% belongs to light industrial, which is significantly higher than what Metchosin has, and that's why they're able to reduce their residential mill rate. Next up, so earlier, I think I've thrown around a number of like 2,200 as folios for properties. That is incorrect. It's actually the number of occurrences that are in the District of Metchosin. The bottom number, 1,826. That is the number of parcels in Metchosin. The occurrences are the different classes, so residential, utilities, light industrial. The reason we can have 2,298 occurrences on 1,826 active folios is because some properties have residential and farm, residential and business, residential, business, and farm. You can have recreation and residential, that type of thing. So you can have 2 or 3. I think the most I've seen them chosen is 3. There might be somebody with 4 out there, but and then again, their taxable value on the side. So 2.23 is residential out of the 2.27. So heavily weighted towards residential, and that's why any new costs, such as the RCMP or ECOM, is heavily borne by the residential property owner. Next up, so it was asked about what was going to happen after 2030. We showed big increases in the RCMP cost, and by the end of 2030, we will have used up all of the police and revenue shortfall reserves. So the full impact of the RCMP, ECOM 911, and the loss of the Mary Hill PILT, or payment in lieu of taxes, will be felt in 2031. That was all part of the overall 35% tax increase that we'd be seeing between 2026 and 2030 to recover basically and offset $1 million in additional revenue needed. This is based on assumptions, again, that RCMP and ECOM 911 increase at about 5% a year. Mary Hill land is transferred in 2028, and then there's no real big change in our tax base in Metchosin.
So through the chair, Mr. Creek, when we're looking at that and you talk about the full impact of the RCMP, for example, at that point in 2031, we will have, I think from the figures we're looking at, we will have used the reserves to bring in a tax increase of whatever the number is per year, like 3% per year, 2 something percent per year each year. So we will have absorbed most of that in the tax base, where we will have achieved the payment for the RCMP in the base. So the full impact will have been softened all the way. And so here are we talking about the annual increases to the RCMP budget?
Through the chair? Correct. Yeah. So
The reserve will have done its job.
yeah, absolutely. So it's like you didn't get the 35% impact in 2022 or 2025. It's been spread over. Like you've had like 5, 6, 7% tax increases in the police tax for the last couple of years, and essentially it's just going to keep going and going and going until 2031. So in 2030, we use about $100,000 from the police reserve. So then 2031 is when here's the last bit that was covered. So $100,000 equivalent to about 3% tax increase. So that'll be the last extra bit needed.
And just following up, that percentage of say 6%, that's 6% on the RCMP portion of the budget, but I think last year the number was more like 0.5% for police in the municipal budget, or it's a different figure for the municipal budget as compared to the percentage increases on the RCMP itself.
Through chair.
Or 3.3%, I guess it was.
For the tax increase? Sorry.
Can you?
No, the police portion, it wasn't a 6% every year, I don't think.
Through here, I'd have to double check it just to confirm. Okay, on to the next one. What do we got here? So at the council meeting on October 27th, resident talked about, hey, can staff bring up more ideas for revenue generation? I've generally kind of avoided it, just kind of pointing out the ideas for how to go collect some additional funding, which is property taxes, user fees, service agreements, fundraisers. Apologize, didn't add in grants. So there's grant funding from CRD is a great resource for provincial, federal, that type of thing. Based on the most recent federal budget, doesn't look like infrastructure grants are going to be disappearing anytime soon. They're going to keep funneling money into that. So that it was a positive coming out of that. But in regards to property taxes, so there's a couple ways that the district could generate additional money. One, simply increasing the mill rate, right? We just go from 1.166 to 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, and generate more money that way. Or increasing the taxable assessment base. So as I said, going from 2.2 to 2.5 actually reduces everybody's taxes based on the current budget. So these are just total options, just spitballing. You can add new land through boundary adjustments, just like they've done with the buffer land. You can allow for additional buildings on the current land. You can change zoning to more lucrative property classes, like business and light industrial. At their mill rates are 4.5 and 6 times what the residential rate is. Or you can reduce the municipal owned land in the district. We don't tax ourselves, so that's land's just sitting there, not just generating costs for the district rather than any revenue. For user fees, we can increase current user fees at a reasonable amount each year, like for the gym, building permits, demo permits, that type of thing, trees, what have you. We can enhance the collection of unpaid user fees, like the business licenses, that type of thing. And then there's the option for development cost charges. So the district does not currently have a DCC bylaw, which means developers do not have to provide any funds to the district for additional services that their developments might require. Most municipalities have a DCC bylaw, and most recently an ACC bylaw that the province allows. And this is just additional funds that they have to contribute, because as they develop, they're going to add more people. Those people require services. That additional funding can go towards like new municipal hall, paying for the additions to the school because there's going to be more rec usage, or fire hall, etc. So those are a couple ways.
Question.
Sorry, go ahead.
What,
TM.
through the chair, BCCs, wouldn't that be predicated on services like water and sewer, which we don't provide? So how would we be able to justify a DCC when we don't even provide that?
Through the chair.
Just curious what you're thinking there.
Yeah. So through the chair, you could have a DCC for water and service. You can also have DCC for parks and amenities. So where I last came from, the town of Comox, they have DCC just for parks. So like every time they add a development, it's like here's $50,000 into there. Then you can add more playground equipment, that type of thing for the new families that are moving in. Yeah. Wouldn't be for sewer and sidewalk and that type of thing. So service agreements, next up. We can negotiate better terms for the district with the current leaseholders. We can find new tenants for the current holdings. And then there's the option for advertising on municipal property. And then that would kind of generate some additional funding. So you could put advertising on the field fence around there. A lot of people have it for dog parks. They just generate money from like pet stores, that type of thing. Any number of options. And then fundraisers. It's not a typical thing for a municipality to hold, but if you want to keep with the rural idea of chosen, certainly something to consider as a way to generate money without increasing taxes on anybody.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through
Councillor
you,
Shuka.
Mayor Little. Thank you, Mr. Cree, for interesting ideas. One question, the user fees, that would include business license fees, I would imagine. Great, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we keep hearing about the how low our business license fees are, $35. And people have pointed me to areas where not only does somebody have farm tax status, but they seem to be operating an unrelated business on their property as well. So there's significant advantage that they have in terms of running things and having a very, very low tax rate. So I think that is something we really should have a look at as soon as we can. And I totally recognize staff are consumed with many things. But,
Through the chair, there's especially when they're on ALR land, there's a few different rules. It's not just clear cut on do you need a business license if you're operating a farm-based business on a farm property. And we've dealt with that in my short time here, but certainly something to look into. Certainly increasing the fees on a number of them, because some of them are generating significant amount of revenue, and $35 is a drop of the bucket compared to what someone will make in a month or a year. Next up, Councillor questions. So the first one is about the CRD invasive treatment costs, and below is the last 5 years of what we've paid to the CRD for treating invasive species like knotweed and Japanese blackweed and some other random ones that are kind of blanking on the name. So nothing in 2025. 2024, 1,638. 2023 was 1,856. Then just over $400 in 2022 and 2021. There was a question about the police reserve usage in 2025. Total econ cost for econ 911 in 2025 was $103,950, and total reserve to cover that will be $51,933. So just around half. Okay. Next up was there was a question about the growing community fund and using that for the land management plan for the buffer land. Answer is yes, totally allowed. It can be used for feasibility studies and any kind of park-related additions or maintenance. And then Councillor Gray was looking into kind of the worst-case scenario for Fire Hall here on the impact on the budget. So depending on when that is actually completed, or if it's completed, kind of came up with this rough model of what the cost would be for over the next 50 years, based on the life of the new Fire Hall if it was built. So we go from just spending $5 million on it to $40 million on it, with minimum tax increase being 5.12%, with the max tax increase being 128%. And number of assumptions in here, right? So the grant from the Strategic Priority Fund would be for $7 million. The interest rates used were based on the October 28th, 2025 borrowing rates from MFA. That interest rates would increase by 1% every 10 years. The square footage would be 10,725 for the $5 million and $10 million options. Added 2,000 square feet onto the $15 million option. And then option 1A from the JDA report was used for the 21, 26, 31, and $40 million options. Insurance, based on $3,500 per $1 million. That was a quote I got from our current insurer, Aon. And then amortization, based on a 50-year life for the structure and the roof. And the services would be for 25 years. Just took that from the report back on August 20th. And then the cost of the building was allocated to 61% structure, 12% roof, and 27% services. And that was just based on the fire hall cost estimates. And so, here's it broken down into another lovely little table with the minimum and maximum tax increases. The maximum tax increase, we could reduce that if over the first 30 years kind of smooth out the tax rate, just because it does change based on the amount of debt being paid, the interest rate going up. So it could be a little bit lower, but not significantly. It might move a couple percentage points here and there. What else I got? So all these, if you take all these numbers, you can add it on to the 10% that we need to cover our CMP, ecom, asset management, along with just covering the general operations of the district, which factors in at about 2%. What else we got here? And then there's a question about the other service agreements that we have from the other taxing authorities. So unfortunately, we can't opt out of BC Transit or CRD, the school, etc. The only two that we can look at would be the West Shore Parks and Rec Society and the Greater Victoria Public Library. So right now for West Shore Parks and Rec, we collect $624,000. For the library, it's $335,000. We've got a reserve for West Shore Parks and Rec of $1.9 million. And then right now, West Shore Parks and Rec is expecting an annual increase of 4.17% each year for the next 5 years. The library would be at 3.8%. Our cost per capita, for whatever reason, with West Shore Parks and Rec, is higher than any other municipality at $85.78 a person, which is $14 higher than anybody else. And then for the library, we're paying the second highest amount at $62.71, with Oak Bay being number 1 at 6963. How to council is give them 1 year notice. Cost to council with West Shore Parks and Rec, there's nothing in the agreement. All we got to do is say we don't want to be part of this anymore. We'd actually end up being bought out by one of the other current members or all of them. So there'd actually be some money just because of the shares that we own in it. Whereas with the public library, it indicates that we'd have to buy out any portion of existing leases that they have to purchase, cost of removing patron and bibliographic records from the record of the board, and then employee costs related to the withdrawal, so them doing their own paperwork. I can find out what the cost. I didn't see anything about leases in their financial information that they've provided so far, but I'm sure I can find something. So, up next for this project is we've got capital projects starting on November 20th. December 4th, we're going to finalize the capital projects for the 2026 fiscal year so that we can get start putting out tenders, RFPs if needed. December 30th, we're going to receive the BC assessment completed roll, and then I can calculate the first draft tax mill rate, see what is going to go on with that. Then in January, I can provide that estimated tax rate and on the draft financial plan, hold an open house for the public for even more questions. And then February, maybe March, finalize the 2026 to 2030 financial plan bylaw. So, based on discussions at our last meeting, people brought up increasing the grant and aid funding by $15,000, allocating $25,000 from the Growing Community Fund to buffer land management plan, potentially hiring a project manager for the fire hall project, and now I just put it back to Mayor and Council. What else? What other adjustment would you like to see in the draft financial plan going forward?
Okay, thank you. Okay, Council, do you have any questions regarding the presentation? It follows in the council package how it went along. So anybody have any questions, please ask Mr. Creek. Councillor Shukin, go ahead.
So, through you, Mayor Little. Mr. Creek, I'm wondering if you could go back a few slides to the tape where you showed us the different tax classes. Yeah, sure, that'll do. So, okay, occurrences are what again?
Through the chair. So essentially, it's the number of times that class is done on a active folio. So, or a parcel, right? Sorry, or a parcel. So there's 1,826 parcels, right? So 5-acre parcel, 10-acre parcel, that type of thing. And then that's the number of times like a residential property, a class is recognized on one of those parcels.
One thing I'm intrigued about is the managed forest land with an overall assessed value at $337,000. Now, what I understand is that parcel, those things are under provincial regulation. And I'm not sure if you'll be able to go too deep into this, but
Through chair. No, I would not be able to.
okay.
Not right now. So I can certainly find out like what kind of questions do you have.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Okay, so I need to refresh myself in how many actual parcels of land. I know I can see the occurrences there. How many parcels we have? I believe I know where 2 of them are, or at least 1 of them. And I'll confess, I've heard from a number of people that they're quite interested in what's going on with those properties. There's a new paved road. There seems to be a lot of active dump truck traffic there as well. So again, that sparks my curiosity. And again, the assessed value I'm curious to know how much land is there as well. So, and again, what the jurisdiction is over that. So, another question though, our flexibility in terms of setting the mill rate, where does that lead? Are we governed by certain things, or do we have a fair bit of freedom?
Through the chair, most cases you got a fair bit of freedom. The community charter limits that the utilities can't be higher than 40 to 1 against the residential rate. So there's a cap on that. And I believe there's a cap on, there's one other class in there, but the rest of them you are free to do as you wish. You can increase farm, you can increase light industrial business. I will say that there are taxpayer groups out there that do watch that. If anybody knows about the Angry Victoria Taxpayer Group, they put out a report annually on the business tax rate, and they try and shame people into it. When I first got here, I looked at it. They were complaining about basically every municipality in the CRD on their tax rate for business compared to residential. Most groups want it to be 4 to 1. There's very few, if any, that were in that rate. Even the numbers that they showed for 2023, all of them went up in 2024. So they were mad about it being 4.5 to 1. When I looked at it, it was, well, it's now 5 to 1 for a number of them. So yeah. That's essentially where you get some pushback. They say the higher the business mill rate, the lower productivity. Nobody wants to set up a business. It reduces willingness to open a business. There's the back and forth on it. Like they have more customers to pay for it versus a residential property that only has 1 or 2 people living there to pay taxes versus a business that could be serving 100,000, 10,000 customers, where all you got to do is increase their cost by a penny to pay for the tax. But certainly policy that we can think about. One thing that the district is missing is a tax rate policy that we should probably start working on with council. We get some input on where you want to see residential and then utility, light industrial business, that type of thing. See where you want to go with it. Generally, you aim for taxing utilities at a 40 to 1 rate. They make a lot of money. Generally, what you send them is a drop in the bucket to them. So, again, the last place I worked, it was 40 to 1 there, and nobody ever said anything. I did increase it this year because I think you were at about, district was sitting at like 10 or 12 to 1. So I bumped it up. I think my plan was about 3 years to get you up to 40 to 1, just to generate a little bit more money. And like the $800,000 is not going to make a big ripple, but it's something.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. And through you, Mayor Little, I'm not suggesting unreasonably cranking mill rates, and I'm very familiar with some of these angry taxpayer groups, and yeah, there's a little body called the Residents of Machosen who we hear from time to time. So yeah. Quick question, back jumping around here, your table on the fire hall cost. I think simple thing, look at page 11 if you don't mind. So if you go down, I think what you're assuming here is, so $15 million cost, third sort of set of columns there. What you're assuming is that's a capital cost of $15 million with a grant of $7 million.
Through your
Correct. Okay, great. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I just had a quick question from leading off from where Councillor Shukin was going. So the managed forest lands, historically, has the mill rate been less than the residential mill rate?
Through chair, no,
No,
it's always been higher.
always higher. Okay. Do you know how much higher?
Top of my head, no. I can
No.
get that for you.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, council, other questions regarding what has been presented or anything operational? Yeah, Councillor Gray.
Yes, I had a question, about, and Mr. Creek, you may not have the answer to this one. Some years ago, the province changed the way things were run around the ambulance service and medical callouts, and so we were excluded from providing those callouts from the fire department, is my understanding, or there's a certain level of acuity where there were callouts or not. At any rate, we've moved into that area big time, so we're doing a lot of callouts. We arrive, it sounds like, well in advance of the ambulances typically. And there were discussions, or I've heard there were discussions about, whether that would be permanent or not. And we heard that the conversation kind of just dropped off, and so we've kept on with medical callouts. But there has never, to my understanding, there's never been a confirmation from the province we would continue that. We are continuing it, and things have been discussed certainly at AVIC and UBCM about if we're doing that work, we're kind of filling in a hole created in a sense by the ambulances being slower at response. Is there anything that we might do in terms of carrying on a conversation with the province about those costs that we have and they're interested in covering some of it? I realize the province is not in good financial shape. I just don't know if that conversation continued or if it just stopped.
Through the chair, I'm unaware if that conversation continued or not. No mayor, I think the mayor has brought up that it seemed unlikely that the ambulance service would actually, set up a bay here and start answering calls. But I've had very little knowledge of what was going on with it. I know it was something that I was like, the number of medical calls that the fire department is addressing exceeds, right, the number of fires that are actually fought in a year. So if there was any way to get out of it, that would definitely be a boon to the operation costs for the fire department. But maybe the mayor has another side.
Yeah, so the formal discussions between BC Ambulance, the provincial government, and the group which was called Bring Back Our Calls, those, once they reinstated that, though we haven't met again. And regarding who pays for it, BC Ambulance and the provincial government are not interested, I'm told, in compensating municipalities for providing that service. I think if you were to ask Metchosin residents whether that is a service that they wish to us to advocate for, to continue to provide, I think Metchosin residents would be overwhelmingly interested in continuing that service that the fire department provides, whether or not we were compensated for that.
Yes, my question with regards to revenue generation, not reducing the service. Under the topic here of revenue generation, I guess.
Well, we could certainly ask them. Definitely when we have conversations with the ministerial meetings, we do point out what also we do in collaboration with the province, especially when we're asking for grants, that we are good collaborative partners in providing services for our communities, members in the region. But we can certainly have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea, on the understanding that they just dropped off one day and we didn't carry on. So I gather we haven't even received a note saying that, or a recognition that we are continuing to provide the service.
They did drop off. They did drop off and then they were resumed. Counts. Yeah.
So, Mr. Creek, you were interested in knowing what we might be interested in looking at here. And I guess from my perspective, there's a few things that have come up that are interesting to learn a little bit more about. And I understand today is just an idea of a sketch of, well, these are kind of the ideas. And I wonder if there's an ability to look at them and see, well, what are they and sort of quantify them. So I'm looking at property taxes to increase the taxable assessment base, and there's a number of suggestions there. But I don't know to say, oh, let's do that one or the other one. or even advocate opposing them without knowing a little bit more about how much money is involved. So, for example, allow for additional buildings on current land. Is there any change going to come to our, or are we expecting any difference in revenues with the housing proposals that are coming forward from the planner? And one area, I guess, but the other was the idea of, say, reduced municipal owned land. I'm not sure how many parcels we have and whether or not there's money in them. So if we could learn a little bit more about those, that might be helpful to just find out if there's anything there for us. I remember, or I have here the paper you provided before about industrial land, and it was a comparison, so the numbers don't necessarily suit today, but it didn't look like there was a lot of money in, say, a single single industrial property. But it would be idea of many industrial properties. So I just, the lack of understanding just what's the quantum of these kinds of things.
So through the chair, the like the light industrial from that report there, that was looking at what we currently have in the district, and most of it's just like a gravel pit type of deal, and so there's no improvement sitting on it other than maybe a trailer type of thing. If you actually had a real light industrial property with numerous improvements on it, worth tens of millions of dollars, and that's where you can actually see a decent amount of return on the change. And that's what, if that was one way that could be done, highly recommend for like one property, if you ended up with $30-40 million worth of improvements on it, like you'd be looking well north of 6-figure return on tax revenue. But if you just double your current light industrial from 7 to 14, and all it is another 7 gravel pits, that would be a very low return on changing over any zoning that might be required. But I can certainly give you a number of how many parcels are in this valley.
Yeah, just to get a sense of those. It's the same with, excuse me, the user fees. Maybe a table to show, well, what's possible, or which of these are worth us considering further. So I'm just trying to answer the question, what would council like to do? And I'm thinking that's a bit spare here to know which ones to look at deeper. But if you had some advice on that, that would be helpful.
Through the chair, I would, just based on review of bylaws and the fees and everything, all of them should go up, right? Like, everything should be looked at as some kind of increase. If you want to avoid increasing property taxes even more based on the costs that are coming down in the near future, if you can generate more from building permits and demolition permits, subdivision permits, renting out the school, like photocopying even, right? Like anything would be recommended, because as Councillor Shukin mentioned, like the business license fees, $35 or $100 for intermunicipal. It's very little. It doesn't cover the work involved for staff, especially if you got to send out the fire chief, you got to send out the building inspector, you got accounts payable working on it, the planning department working on it. If we were to recover the actual cost on a business license, you'd be looking at north of 200.
Well, maybe I will say that I would like to see that to get some sense of what's possible in that area. I think there was comments in it earlier, just looking in a previous document, but I think it was it $30,000 with a 10% increase or some figure like that. So I think that is worth us looking at, depending on how the mayor and Councillor Shukin feel about it.
Yeah, that would be interesting to get back to the industrial question. I think that would not only be a conversation that we would have at this table. I think that would be recognized as a change in our policy. And so we would need to go out to the community and ask about that, whether increasing industrial or light industrial within Metro was palatable to the whole community.
Right. That's right. And that's why I was asking earlier about the property classes, and it didn't seem to be particularly lucrative. Now I understand that if the light industry had a lot of improvements on it, that's where the money would come from. I was just confused about that. So that was a helpful answer there. And then on the user fee, I guess what I'm saying there is if others are interested, I would like to see what we might do in a more complete manner along the lines of Mr. Creek, of what you've been describing to us.
Okay, is that a budget discussion or is that a CAO Payette?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. So if we're gonna look at a fee, wow, that seems loud. Hello. If we're gonna look at a fee review, I wouldn't mind a decision of council or the finance committee as a whole, because that will take quite a bit of time. Typically, we do comparisons with other municipalities and do some corrections to our fees, or if we're going to increase them, we'd like to have some kind of understanding of what the market is. It's going to take a bit of time, and so if we're going to do that, we should do it fulsomely, not just piecemeal or whatever.
I agree. Does anybody want to put forward a motion, comment, question?
I'm gonna,
Councillor Shukin.
I'm gonna disagree a little bit. I believe that we should be making a beeline to having our business license bylaw and our fees there firmed up and addressed. I do take what Mr. Payette is saying, but we've done a lot of work in terms of the fees for the school, and we now have revenue coming in. But I don't want to kind of, I think the business license portion is really something that's been lagging for years. And I believe it would be great to, hone in on that. I agree that the rest of it does need to be done in a comprehensive way. But that, I think we should maybe start with the, and again, I just, maybe I'm not understanding the full scope, but that one seems to be lagging. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
okay.
And again, it's a great point Mr. Creek makes about all the work that goes in to this that is just not being recovered at all. So, yeah. It's,
CAO Payette?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding correctly, focus on business license fees, but the rest of the litany of fees, charges that we have could be a bigger project in the future.
I think,
Okay.
That's good.
But I still think that would be something that is needed, not top of priority right now, but definitely it sounds like we should increase our fees across the board. But we would definitely need the other information, the research regarding what other municipalities are doing and what can we do. Yeah, okay. Councillor Shukin.
A few questions. Mr. Creek. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. So, Mr. Creek, maybe I'm not understanding this properly, but if you look at the light industrial and the assessed value, it's 2.027 million or something. Is that, it sounds to me like that's the equivalent of almost like just slightly or more than 2 chosen residences, correct?
Through the chair? Correct. That's like 1.5
Okay,
homes.
gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. And sorry, this is a much more broad observation. I want to state I'm not at all comfortable with the idea of advertising or fundraising. So I personally would strike those off the list of things we might do. I'm also, I reckon, thank you to Mr. Creek for bringing this forward, the idea of stepping away from the library and West Shore Parks and Rec. I'm not a big user of those facilities myself, but I trust that others in the community are, and I would be very uncomfortable with moving away from those. But in some ways, that does lead us to, I think, the sort of this equation that Mr. Creek has been kind of leading us to is you cannot have your cake and eat it too. If you want these services, you're going to have to pay for them one way or the other. And people can say, well, then don't do the fire hall, do a cheaper fire hall. Unfortunately, the low cost option disappeared about a decade ago. And so no matter what we do with the fire hall, it is going to cost us. There is, as I understand it, there's nothing left to cut in the district. And even if we did cut, we're bound to be making it up in years hence. So this does lead to a larger question that I think we have to tackle as we go along here. So.
And perhaps we need to have those continued conversations with West Shore Parks and Rec and with the Victoria Public Library about the services that we are getting. So we are paying into the Victoria Public Library, the second highest, I think you mentioned, amongst the municipalities, and yet we don't have a library or even a mobile library here. So perhaps we should have those conversations with them as well. Yeah. Okay. So anything else regarding Councillor Gray?
Yes, I want to just come back through the chair and ask the CEO. CEO, the note says, would council like to explore any of these options further? And I think you're saying that you're not really asking us that question today because it might take work to explore them.
So we just so I'm aware, what are you talking about? You're talking about increasing fees across the board versus honing down right now on the business fee license?
Not
Business
exactly.
fees? Okay.
What I was saying is that we've been given a note which says there's opportunity here. And I'm asking if we could have a bit more detail so we could understand what's the opportunity and what might it be. Mr. Creek's, I think, done a nice job here. And it ends with, this particular section ends with, would council like to explore any of these options further? And now I'm hearing that the answer is, you're not asking that question today.
Maybe I can help. So the fees and charges review we can do in time, like in the next month or so. We have till, what is it, April or whatever for the final budget approval. So as far as the operating budget is concerned, there's time to look at line items in the budget. The bigger ticket items such as reviewing number of possibility for industrial or looking at services and priorities, those kind of decisions or those kind of discussions take a lot of time, obviously, and a lot of public consultation. And I would be just worried about the available time we have between now and when the budget is due, particularly when it comes to doing public engagement and consultation. So that would be my concern. So if there's an indication from council in the next few weeks that they want to pursue any revenue ideas, that's fine. Just be aware that we'll probably be talking about looking at some of these during next year's annual budget for probably the following term, I would say. Some of the big ticket items.
So a question to our CFO. So even if we increase the fees across the board in these other services that we provide, will that amount to a significant increase in our revenue?
Through the chair. As Councillor Gray mentioned there, if we just do the user fees, we'd be looking at an extra 30,000, and then it really comes down to like a big one is our building department. So how many building permits, subdivisions, demolitions, that type of thing. If that drops off like this year, significantly higher than what it was last year. If we ended up having a year like 2024 in 2026, impact from that change would be very minimal. If we have another great year like 2025, you'd be looking at another $30,000 just from that, on top of an extra $30,000 from pulling in the school and that type of thing. So,
and there must be a sweet spot where if you increase the fees so much that it would deter people from applying for permits.
Through the chair, correct. Yeah, as I mentioned, even with the business license thing, like I thought having a lower business license fee would get more people paying for it, because again, back in Comox it was $100, and there we couldn't get people to do it. And then coming here and seeing 35, and you still can't get people to do it. Yeah, how many people are you going to chase away when you do increase to 100, 150, 200? I can't guess what that change would be, but imagine there would be an increase in number of people not doing it. That's where more reliance on CRD by law enforcement would be required.
Councillor Gray.
So I think what's happening here is we're getting confused because we're jumping around topic to topic. I'm not talking about industrial land, or I'm not talking about any of those things in terms of getting a review. I was looking at the note and reading here that we could take a look at user fees, fines, and rental agreements. Increased by 10%, we give $30,000, so it's a tax point. Councillor Creek, Mr. Creek has offered that there might be another $30,000 in the building permits. I just think it's responsible to look at those things. They've been brought to our attention by staff, and the question was, do we want to look at them? And I think we should. I'm not. I wasn't just thinking about anything about the land use decisions. Those were questions that Councillor Shukin was asking, and I was just getting clarity about the value of industrial land. Given an earlier note saying we didn't get much tax from them, I understand that now. That was simply a question for information. My issue now is I think it's worth pursuing these ideas of where we're going, and it sounds like it's possible within the timeframes set before us.
Yep, I agree. Go ahead, Councillor Shukin.
And I agree too. I guess it's a matter though of the high value fees. I mean, we can increase the fees at the gym. Maybe that's the gym, the school, maybe that's going to bring in some stuff. But again, if look at our business licenses, that I think has the potential, especially if you do them as a class, that has the potential of bringing in significant revenue. And I guess so do the business fee or the building fees, inspection fees. So, yeah.
And
I'm on board. Yeah.
And I imagine that municipalities do receive significant revenue from DCCs or ACCs now.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. Like, granted, in the bigger municipalities that have a lot of development going on, like there's many of them have millions of dollars in DCCs sitting there waiting for projects to get funded. So the caveat to a DCC is that the district itself would also need the money. So it's not just solely relying on developers to provide all of the funding for a new park or a new fire hall. You have to have the additional matching funds to go into it. So needed a holistic view of it where we can't just go out and ask the next developer to throw us $10 million for the fire hall.
Sure.
Like, you'll get a little bit, and then you got to make sure you've got the matching funds to go into it as well.
Right, but it's based on the premise that with increase in development, there's increase in services on the roads and the fire hall and municipal hall, all parks all the way around. So it's to compensate for that additional usage.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Shukin.
Just on the realities of doing a DCC program here in Metchosin, because we don't have a lot of large scale development. Is it realistic, and is it going to bring in money? And would it be appropriate for can you apply it to a single family residence? That's new.
Through the chair, you wouldn't want to apply it to just a single family property that's going from 10 acres to 2 5-acre subdivision kind of deal. You'd be looking at more at the people that would have 100 acres that are breaking it into 10 acres or 25-acre properties. And then it's like a lot of work does have to go into the DCC bylaw or ACC bylaw, and then it is just something to have there in your back pocket, so in case somebody does come around, does have a great idea, and council's on board, public's on board, then you don't have to scramble and find some way to get something extra out of a developer.
Councillor Gray.
And so perhaps again to clarify, I'm not actually advocating that we increase all of these fees and this. I would just like to get the information to be able to make a decision about it and to know whether or not it makes sense. So that's where I'm at, not at the point of saying, gee, we ought to do this. We might look at it and say, for example, nah, not the gym, but gosh, the business fees. Like, where's the what do we say? Where's the honey? Where, where's the point that we might be able to do something? So I just wanted to get a little bit more information on it. I think Councillor Shukin, you're probably right about development cost charges. There's very little development going on, and we're not going to see much growth. But again, maybe Mr. Creek could just explain that for us. So we say, yeah, it doesn't look like it's a big spot for money, but so we understand it might become off our list, or maybe we get more serious about that issue.
Okay, Councillor Shukin.
Do we need a motion to ask Mr. Pyatt and Mr. Creek to look closer at this?
No.
Okay, can I would move that we ask staff to provide us with an overview of the opportunities related to increasing or modernizing, if you will, user fees within the district, looking at all the items that are contained in the package for today's meeting. Items 1 to 5. Period.
That's a motion by Councillor Shukin. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Gray. More discussion?
Just
Call the question.
How does that sound, Mr. Creek?
No? Call the question. All in favor? Okay.
Thank you.
So moving along, we've got the user fees, service agreements. Anybody have any?
Mayor Little, did you want to allow public to have input on that part first?
Yeah, that's right. Let's just staff overview, committee discussion. Let's finish our committee discussion a little bit more, and then we'll ask the public. Yeah, thanks for the reminder, Councillor Gray.
I had a question about what was labeled as question 2, which is the CRD invasive treatment costs. And thanks for putting that together, Mr. Creek. I did send you an email too asking about it, and so I'm struck that so I would like a little bit more information on this particular item to justify the request for an additional $2,500 for invasive species, which is in the proposed budget. So I learned through an email that we've underspent the invasive species budget for rabbits. I think it was a $20,000 charge, but we only spent $11,500 in 2025. We look at the CRD costs over the year, which have ranged from 0 to, let me see here, there's $1,800. What did we spend in 2025 in public works and herbicide applicators? That would call for an increase of $2,500 at this point. Where were the applications done and for what? It used to be we knew because we had a report with the CRD and worked with them, but I'm not clear what's going on now and why the costs are as high as they are. Maybe a table showing past and present expenditures by category. I think the numbers that I saw in the third quarter financial report for invasives material were $3,613 and $7,836 for a total of $11,449. That matches the budget for what we spent in rabbits. Like, not the budget, but the expenditure. I just would like to understand that. And then we did have an additional 2025 expenditure of $5,750. Bullfrogs are in there somewhere. Before we agree to an additional $2,500, I'd like to understand what all these numbers mean, not in a micromanaging way, but just to understand where's the pressure here. Is it more expensive, and are we doing more invasive than we should be doing compared to our costs in the past, which were quite a bit lower? I also wanted to mention that I heard from Neil West, who's part of the leading the Machosin Invasive Species Cooperative, that there are grants available to the district for invasive species management from the BC Habitat Conservation Trust. So maybe there's a place for that, depending on what we find out in the detail. Thank you.
Okay, I'm having a hard time exactly pinpointing what you're after. The question that you're asking is, why do we need an extra expenditure of $2,500 for invasive species removal this year?
I'm not even
Because-
sure it's for removal. What is that? What's the bill of $2,500 and what are these other expenditures? What did we spend in 2025? So, and historically, it seems that the budget is ramping up and I'm not clear why. No explanation.
Okay. CFO Creek.
So through the chair, part of the expense this year in that invasive species was public works members getting trained for invasive species removal. I think they took the course through the CRD, and so they'd set that up, and then the request for 2,500 goes to acquiring the invasive species killers like the herbicide or what have you, and then setting up a locked storage container because you need to keep those toxic chemicals under wraps so that other people can't just walk by and take them or steal them. So funding was basically a little cabinet, chemicals to get started, because now I think 2, maybe 3 of the public works staff members have now been certified and passed their chemical handling requirements.
Okay, and so that'll be a one-time expenditure. At some point, they'll need to renew that license. I imagine that won't be annually. I don't know.
Chair. No, not annually. I believe it was good for 5 years because they got like A+ or something on their test. So I think they were good for 5 years.
Okay.
If they had scored, I think it was if they had 70s or something, then they had to do it annually. But they all got over 85, something like that. So they're set for 5 years before they have to go and redo it to make sure they still know what they're doing.
So what Councillor Gray is asking for is a list of, we removed bullfrogs, what did it cost? We sprayed for black knotweed, what did it cost? Rabbits, did we do anything with rabbits this year? If so, how much? Is that correct, Councillor Gray?
That's correct, with a time frame to show what have we spent in the past and what are we spending now. It's just not clear to me that we should be engaged in some of this work, given that it was so inexpensive previously through the CRD. I'm interested in efficient operations here, and the numbers are hard to understand.
Okay.
Just
Go ahead.
Mayor Little,
and sorry, Councillor Gray, I'm having trouble following like the cumulative cost. They seem like pretty small amounts, and I mean, we know who does the bullfrogs, and we have a contractor for the rabbits. And if we're finding our feet in terms of having staff do, herbicide application, I'm willing to give them a few years to move on that. So I think we have to be careful about like what we're asking staff. And again, I think high value requests are what we need now. Personally, I would like to see if we can get the business license bylaw passed before the budget is actually approved by next April. So it's interesting, but is it really worth chasing down that significant?
I don't think this is a big job. Pretty straightforward, just to provide a table with some of the numbers in it. There's a new cost of $2,500. That I guess will be annual now. The numbers are much higher than we used to pay. As I'm adding up, $11,000 doesn't mean as much to you, but I think the mayor's repeatedly said small amounts of money add up and create something. I just would like to understand so we can vote in favor of $2,500 or not, or cut back some of the budget. We got $20,000 for rabbits. We only spent 10. Just sort that out.
Okay. CAO Payat, I can't remember the history of why we moved from the CRD application of herbicides to using our public works crew. Can you remind me about that?
Well, we are a unionized workforce and they have first right of refusal for operational requirements and work. And I'd be concerned if council's going to start to decide what's contracted out and what's not contracted out in our operations. So that's my comment.
Okay.
I
Councillor
guess I
Gray?
should respond to that to say the CRD is also a unionized workforce. We had a long-standing relationship with them. Maybe there's more background that we could learn about that, but be it as it may, I just like to understand the numbers.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's understand the numbers. Okay, let's move along to, where are we in here? That was question 2. Question 3, you've answered that. And question 4, the Growing Communities Fund, the specifications in that Growing Communities Funds is it's actually very broad, as I remember. But things like feasibility studies are eligible for the use of this fund. Councillor Gray.
So I had a question about that for Mr. Creek, and it was simply when we looked at the numbers, which we were just doing about the fire hall, I think the documents we've received so far, we intend to spend all of the Growing Communities Fund money on the fire hall. If we then divert some to different projects, does that in effect mean that we're borrowing money for those other projects? Or how are we use the money for other things that won't be available for the fire hall?
Mr. Creek.
Through the chair, in a roundabout way, yes, but we could also, like for the fire hall itself and the funding of the reserves that we're using, there's still plenty left over in the unappropriated surplus to offset that 25,000. So you can take it from there rather than increasing debt from 7 million to 7,025,000. So there is additional reserves to be used, rather than just only relying on the Growing Community Fund. Even that could say, okay, don't use it for that. We are going to just allocate all of the Growing Community Fund to this, but we take 25,000 out of our unappropriated surplus in order to fund it, or take an extra 25 out of the unappropriated surplus, put it into the fire hall, so that we have 25,000 from the Growing Community Fund.
Right. I asked because everybody knows we made a cut the other day to some support for community groups, and so I'm just not clear where we're taking money from and putting it for these various projects. But that's a good answer. Thank you for laying it out for me.
So perhaps what we could also do with the Growing Communities Fund is we originally received about 2.4 million with the interest that we've accumulated because we haven't spent it. Other communities spent it right away. Langford, I think it had it spent in a day and a half. So we could use the interest, keep the original there, but use the interest for projects such as the 25,000 for the buffer land.
Through the chair, correct. So even the number that we put into the grant application itself, which is based on what we had at that time, in the months since, we might have made $25,000 because it is sitting at close to 2.8 now. I think we're generating close to $10,000 a month in interest from our Growing Community Fund. So even by the time you get to that fire hall, it'll be probably close to 3, if it doesn't take shape until 2028. But
Okay, thank you.
I think it's just important to remember that so I'm just, in a sense, I'm playing back to the tape. When there's not money for this, but there's money for that, it's not clear to me that if we're going to, if we have a major expenditure coming, then we need to manage our money as we go into it and not start making cuts in different areas or adding money without thinking about the impact of it generally. So if we didn't have the money for one thing, we have it for something else, it becomes confusing as to what our priorities are in terms of our strategic plan and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think maybe Councillor Shu can remind us of our priorities, but as I do remember, one of our priorities was to significantly look at the buffer lands, decide what we were going to do with it, and effectively manage it. And that was one of our priorities. The fire hall was also a priority on that. Can you remind us, Councillor Shukin?
Yeah, no, I believe you've got it absolutely correct, Mayor Little. And to me, drawing on future amount for the beginnings of management steps for the buffer land, I think, is appropriate at this stage, simply because we haven't really decided yet what we're going to do with that land, and we don't know the timing yet of when we're going to be able to act on the buffer land. Again, in terms of setting up some of the management structures. The one thing that I have to mention to people, that if we don't act, that parcel will be claimed by somebody else, as in the residents who are going to be moving into the Langford side. Just one example, I was on the buffer land, I think on Tuesday, walk up and there's a commercial dog walker with a group of 6 dogs, wonderfully behaved dogs, but when I went up to the high point, I could see them running around the area that a group of residents had pulled broom from. And so it's a rocky, sensitive area, and all the moss is going to be stripped off. And these folks probably visit that area several times a week. So again, just getting in there and putting our own footprint in, I think, is going to be really critical. So.
And I think it really needs to be pointed out that we need to take every opportunity to increase our revenues, like applying for grants. And kudos for us for applying for that $7 million grant. There are other grants available. I do send CRD grant alerts to our CFO, and he's actively looking for grants. So anybody have any information on grants that are coming available, please send them to us. Councillor Gray.
I just want to explain, I wasn't speaking against spending the money on the buffer land. I was talking about where's the money coming from, and is it the same as going into debt for the different purposes that we do. That wasn't about whether we proceed or not, just getting clear on the dollars.
Okay, so let's move on. That's question 4 and question 5. The impacts of the fire hall. So the question that Councillor Gray had asked, what's the worst case scenario? That's outlined here in the table and in the graph and in the information that we have available here. Are there any more conversations or questions you want to ask about this?
I don't have any. I don't remember asking for a worst case scenario, but rather understanding what the opportunities were. Maybe I would just ask, when we're looking at the graph, Mr. Creeker just beside me here, but the $21 million plus grant, those are the numbers there for the current plan. If it stayed at the same price, we got 16% or almost 70% tax increase, or almost 40% tax increase, I guess. Those are the numbers that we'd be looking at now if we're successful with the grant. And that's not including the operating costs I had mentioned.
Through Chair. No, that's the operating cost. That is full debt repayment, operating costs, amortization, say for the next fire hall after the fact. So the 39% would be in year 21 through 30, when you're still dealing with the last amortization of the services and the highest related debt costs. And then after that, you start falling down to that 16.64%.
Thank you.
Councillor Shukin, do you have any specific questions regarding this? So one of the comments that was made earlier was at some point we're going to have to hand the project over to a project manager. Would that be, is council thinking 2025? We might need this, and if so, we should put the money in the budget. Councillor Shukin.
Mayor Little, I think the answer is yes. And what is interesting for me is over the last year, there has been, I think, a very clear consensus that something has to be done with the fire hall, whether it's a full rebuild, upgrades to the apparatus bay, replacement of the admin sleeping quarters, something has to be done. I think the other thing that has everyone, I think, is clued into is the longer we wait, the more expensive it becomes. And I think a project manager hired in an appropriate way, given appropriate sort of a terms of engagement, if you will help us ferret through the options and do so no disrespect to the firehouse steering committee, but a volunteer committee that meets once a month. I think we need a professional to be engaged in this process, and also a professional that will take the advice and input from our committee as well. So I'm convinced that we need to do this because we do need to act on the fire hall. The question is how much and when, and that I don't really have deep insights. I will say I doubt it's going to be cheap, but if we get the right person, I believe that will have significant benefits for us, and it will probably pay for itself in some manner.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask the CAO for a comment on this regarding the coordinator to shepherd us through the fire hall project.
Yeah, so to date, every professional involved with this project has indicated the sooner we move towards professional project management, the better, and the more cost savings we'll see at the end, regardless of which they would go in terms of upgrades or new build. And so what I would recommend is that I could bring information to council on what we could expect for a service for fee, and that might help council with the decision if they're going to invest in our future. So, thanks.
And also what we heard when we met with the granting authority, UBCM, was that any costs that we incur with the project could be retroactive from the time that we submitted the grant.
Yeah, correct. So starting the date of the application submission, any of the costs directed towards that project could be retro to the grant, but of course the risk management is if we don't get the grant, then we'll absorb that cost probably through one of our current standing grants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Councillor Gray?
Yeah, I too am of the view that we could not succeed with the fire hall project without a project manager. The issue I would have is timing. When is that appropriate? And I think what I'm interested in seeing is the work that Councillor Shukin has, brought forward the idea of, don't have the language here right now, the governance, how will the project be managed? And once we hear back from the CEO on that question, I'm hoping there'll be a bit more information to figure out where does a project manager fit in, and what are the different, do we need a fire hall steering committee? What do our staff do? All of that Councillor launched with this motion that I was supporting that day. Mm-hmm. Once we have that, then it seems to me we'll have a better idea what decisions come next.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine, CAO Payette, that if we had information from the professional that is helping us, the project manager, that information could go to the fire hall steering committee for their opinion, and then that could be brought to council as well. Yep.
Not sure I understand what you're saying, Mayor Little.
So the recommendations from the coordinator, the consultant who's going to shepherd us through the fire hall building or reframing or new build, whatever we do with the fire hall project, recommendations may come back to council for decision. We could also engage the fire hall steering committee with those questions, depending on how we
if we have that structure after the governance.
Well, sure. Yeah. Okay. Regarding the fire hall, more questions, comments, things you would like to see here? Okay. And then regarding the operating budget, continued from page 7. Anything else there? Oh, the grant and aid funding. So Mr. Creek, Mr. Payette, we've mentioned to the societies and the groups that receive permissive tax exemptions before that they would have an opportunity to come to a grant and aid should we put that money in the budget. Not that they're going to come forward, but they might for the other taxation authorities portion of their taxes.
Can I start on this through the chair?
Yeah,
Do you
please
mind
do.
if I
Thank you.
chime in? Thanks. Sorry I was away for a couple weeks. I missed a little bit of the action, but I want to harken back to maybe might have been a finance meeting or a council meeting where I was able to speak about what I believe is good accounting practices from a CAO perspective is to
I just have
Run.
a point of order. Maybe I should leave the room if you're going to discuss the grant and aid for a little bit, and I'll come back when you're done.
Okay.
The reason is that I'm involved in the community hall as a trustee there.
So, Mayor Little, the one thing I would maybe ask Councillor Gray to do is be consistent. If Councillor Gray is declaring a conflict of interest and leaving the room now, that would mean you should not be talking about this topic at all, especially to the media. If you're blanketing, doing a blanket conflict of interest, that should stick, not just at the table, but all over. I think that's really clear in the community charter.
I think
I'm just
we're
gonna leave the
weighing
room
it.
and then-
Hold on. I would ask that all councillors, when they declare a conflict of interest, to be consistent. We can't be seen as trying to mitigate or trying to prevent somebody from making a conflict of interest declaration. Councillor Gray has made this conflict of interest a declaration, and I suspect he will now be very consistent with that because the public has heard it and we've heard it. Okay, so let's go.
Okay.
CAO Payette, thank you.
Thank you through the chair. My comment is kind of expanding on what I had said previously regarding channeling any kind of council support through grant and aid. And that way we can track it through accounting appropriately. So my analogy was if we're renting out a space in the gymnasium for free, that we should account for that appropriately. And so if we channel it through the grant and aid line item and pay for that space, then that space over the year, we know what the cost of that space is and what the revenue of that space is. So my thought is that we should make sure, council should try their very best to ensure there's enough financial support in their budget for grant and aid to carry us through the year. And if we anticipate that there's going to be a change in council's provision of funding for groups or whatever you want, nonprofits, I would really, really recommend that we consider having that appropriate amount of money in the grant and aid line item, so then we can allocate it appropriately to whichever line item that we're providing that service from. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're highly recommending. So we typically have a cap on the grant and aid at $5,000. What we're talking about here is societies, nonprofit societies and group who have previously received the permissive tax exemption in full, not the partial grant that we gave them that we have already voted on. So that's so
yeah, that's part of it. But also, if you know, a group comes and asks to use a kitchen for a very worthy cause, which is fantastic, that we would pull that from grant and aids as well. It doesn't mean we have to spend all the money that's in the budget of grant and aids. It just means that we've tried our best to appropriately allocate that kind of funding so that through the year we can draw from it and expense it to the right line item. I'm not saying we're spending the whole amount. I'm just saying let's try and get it right at the beginning of the year.
okay. Okay. CFO Creek, did you want to comment on that?
Through the chair, is going with the CAO's comment there. It's accurate that we should be showing how much money is being given away by the district, and just last year alone, right, when gave MACA the ability to use the school facilities for their Makers Market for free. My bad in that I did not record any journal entry to show, hey, this actually cost the district, $565 because they gave it to them for free and increased the expense for grant and aid. We just left it as, hey, you gave $5,000 away through your regular provisions in March and June, but we haven't been keeping track of all the freebies that you give away when the charities and not-for-profits do come around throughout the year asking for use of the field for a project or the use of the school. And so, like Bob was saying, much better to, okay, let's allocate a budget of an extra 10, 25,000, 30,000. Not that say you're going to use it, but it's there for when those groups do come around, and then you can show it at the end of the year properly. You're like, hey, we gave away our 5,000, plus we gave another $5,000 away in free usage of municipal facilities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we can't make any motions right now. We don't have quorum. We need 3. So when we've got other council members at the table that are not declaring a conflict of interest, we'll be able to increase that. But definitely we need to take these wise words to heart.
I guess through the chair, so just because it is a draft financial plan, we're going to be making a number of changes. I was speaking with the planner this morning about the OCP review that has to be done by 2030, and that's actually a significant cost. And so I'll be adding that into the next draft financial plan that we'll be showing, just to increase our costs in planning for 27 through 2030 in order to facilitate that requirement for the province. So I can certainly add in a change like that to cover additional grant and aid as seen, as you want. Okay. I personally would need to see a motion for it.
Okay. And just since you brought it up, how much will that be for the additional OCP review at the end of 2029, 30?
Through the chair. So it's got to be done by the end of 2030. And I've got a rough estimate of $100,000. So I'm going to do $25,000 a year starting in 2027 once the new council's in place. And they can start working on that process of hiring the contractor and getting the hours, and doing the public consultations and everything involved with it, because it will be a fulsome review. Because the last time that OCP was done, I believe she said it was 1995. So it'll be basically 35 years since the last one. It's going to be quite a bit of work.
Okay, so unless you have any comments, let's move on to the next steps. Could you ask Councillor Gray to come back in? Oh, actually, we're going to go to the public. We'll ask the public, does anybody have any questions from the public? If so, could you state your name and your street?
Thanks. First of all, I just want to thank Jeffrey Creek for his amazing financial reporting. I've never seen any CFO or any financial person in the district be this responsive and this thorough. So it's amazing material. I also think that management of invasive species is critical for our rural community. Like, to me, being rural means constantly managing invasive species. And I'd really love to see Councillor Gray work with Neil applying for one of the Habitat Conservation Trust grants. It would be awesome to see some leadership applying for a grant and bringing in some money to help that way. I just have a question for Mr. Creek about one piece of info that you reported on, Mr. Creek, and you said something like the 2.2 billion assessed value. If it goes up, then the tax increase would in fact could significantly go down. if that whole assessed $2.2 billion worth of taxable property or whatever was actually assessed higher. And I just wonder, like, if there's any way that council or the district can look at properties that are really kind of discrepant in terms of their assessed value. Like, I wonder if there's just 3 or 5 or 7 properties that are in fact so under-assessed that if BC assessment were brought in to sort of correct or ensure that the assessment is on par, if that might yield really significant tax benefits for Metchosin. Not sure.
CFO Creek.
Through the chair, thank you for your kind words. And next up would be, I don't think the district can ask BC Assessment to go around and say, hey, can you double check a couple of properties? I know individual property owners themselves have gone out there and said, hey, I would like to appeal my assessment. The district appealing assessments on our behalf in order to
Gotcha.
increase our tax revenue.
Right.
That seems unlikely, but I can definitely take a check into it, see if anybody's done it. I'm about to meet with the CFOs from the CRD in another week, and I'll see if anybody's had success doing that.
That'd be awesome.
Bring that back for the next meeting.
Like, even not even just the residential properties, but the forest management lands or those tree farm lands. I wonder if that's some of those different classes of property might be interested in as well.
CEO Payette.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair to council, just for our information, we have met with BC Assessment now at each of the UBCM meetings that I've been able to go to so far. And we've been working with them in this regard as far as understanding, what our boundaries are in terms of asking BC Assessment to come and do a fulsome review of all of our properties in the municipality, which of course they're reluctant to do because that would be time intensive for them. But we should keep picking away at BC Assessment and keep getting their attention on this. They did indicate and allude to being able to come and do kind of a red check assessment of various properties at our last meeting, and I do want to follow up on that and see exactly what that meant. And I think, like everything, everyone's really busy, and if we keep on them and we keep kind of giving them information and educating them on Metchosin, I think is in all of our best interests.
And they were all also interested in areas that we thought needed a relook. Okay. Anybody else wish to speak at the microphone?
Good afternoon. I echo the last speaker's accolades for our financial officer. That was a great presentation, and having it on the screen is great. Just through the chair to Mr. Creek, I recall when the land swap agreement went through, I believe in 2017, part of the agreement was the district was to receive some taxation from, I believe, the industrial lands. And maybe that those funds could go towards any sort of management of the buffer land. I believe there's $25,000, but I'm quite certain that there's funds coming in on an annual basis. And maybe you can just let me know what that is. That'd be great.
CFO Creek.
Through the chair, so you are correct. We are receiving money from the city of Langford for that land. In 2025, we received $17,000 or $18,000, and I believe Councillor Donaldson at our last budget meeting requested that we basically set up a reserve for the buffer land, using that tax money to go directly into there to cover these types of things. So it'll certainly be, I'm going to be crafting that bylaw, bring that to council, and see if they get approval to put that through.
Okay. Any follow-up questions? No? Any other questions?
Gary Lamb, 860 Hackmore Drive. couple of questions I have. All the information that's presented in these council meetings, the information package is on the website, so we can have access to that. Any information that's spoken to here by way of slides, is that available to the public?
Through the chair. Yep. I believe I handed this slide deck in kind of late today, but the corporate officer or deputy corporate officer or legislative assistant there will have it on the website.
So it'll ultimately be available to the public.
Yeah.
Great.
And it's also videotaped as well, so people can tune in for that portion of the meeting as well, if they want the verbal.
Yep, right. Yeah, no, I understand the verbal, you can hear it, but the written submissions, okay, that's good. The second question I've got is regarding the library. And I guess just a general question. Why would consideration not be given to allocating the costs of the library services based on a per capita basis versus some arbitrary method?
Mr. Creek.
Through the chair. That's just how the library and West Shore Parks and Rec allocate their budget requests. It's not based on assessment like we do. It's just we don't charge based on, there's 3 people on that parcel, so let's charge them X number. But the library comes at us and says, based on BC stats, you've got 5,386 people. We're going to charge you based on that somehow. And it gets a little wonky in the fact that we are so high, but they allocate their budget and then they show us on a per capita basis rather than on a taxable assessment basis.
So bottom line, is it allocated on a per capita basis?
Ooh, you want good question, through chair. The way they show it when they make their budget presentation to me, it's on a per capita basis.
Okay.
And they don't go with the census, they go with the BC stats, yearly
Right.
BC statistics.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else wish to make any comments?
Good evening, Avril Yilcomb, Windfall Road. Something that was not addressed at the this meeting was disposing of district property for money. So I will bring up the, I don't know the address, whether it's Kangaroo or Lindholm, just below Blinkhorn. Could sell that. $1 million. Spellman Park, take away the status of park because it's not used as a park. When it was first brought up a number of years ago, there's no self-service up there. Sell it, $1 million. Lombard, once you get it, sell it, $1 million, because there'll be no money to turn it into a training center as somebody plans. $3 million, easy peasy.
Well, thank you. This was addressed in the report. Mr. Creek mentioned reduce municipal-owned land in the district. And he notes that there's no taxes received from district-owned property. So he did, okay. Yeah, that's right. So that's for something for council to consider, municipally owned land that we could sell for revenue. Yeah, that definitely is one of our options. Okay. Anybody else?
I just had a couple, I guess, questions. comments through the chair. So when you were looking at sort of what we pay versus other communities, there was a bit of a perception that our mill rate's lower because we have fewer services provided to us. I think the other way to look at it is our costs are increasing just as much as they are in other communities, yet we have the same number of people paying. So while we see other communities increasing residents by the thousands with the new provincial legislation, new businesses, new industrial commercial businesses, they actually get a lower taxation when you spread it out amongst, their increase over the year. And then a comment around the ALC properties that do have businesses running on them. ALC legislation allows commercial activity on farm status properties. There's a few rules around it, being that, that business has to be contained within a dwelling, use a certain portion of the land. So, just in listening, I think the idea of business license fees increasing does at least offset that a little bit, because I'm not sure how else the district would deal with that. And then the big one for me is as a resident who has never really had to use the ambulance or first responders before in the last year, we've had to use it twice. And I can't imagine the community losing our first responder service. Years ago, when the community fought back hard for that, I didn't really quite understand the difference in timing between ambulance and first responders. And I just wanted to quickly recap those two scenarios. The last one, our first responders were on site and working on an older man who was down. And it was probably about 15 or 20 minutes before the call came through on their radio from 911. And so I had immediately contacted the fire chief and within seconds contacted 911, and that was the delay in service. And I can't imagine if that man had been waiting. Another one was a family member, and it was more than 45 minutes before ambulance showed up. And again, it was a serious health concern. So I sort of feel what the mayor had mentioned, that I can't see the community supporting losing our first responders. The other side of that is we are over the time allowed distance to get to a hospital, and not having first responders in our communities would affect a lot of businesses and projects that are run in this community. Anybody working in the community has to have basically one step lower as a paramedic on site. You have to have boards, you have to have vehicles available to you, and a lot of people just don't realize that reality on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not just to our community members, but it's also to members of other communities who visit our parks and trails and beaches. For instance, the 4 overdoses that the fire fighters responded to at Taylor Beach in the last couple of years. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with the response that you provided, and also Mrs. Rourke. My question was about revenue to pay for the service that we all enjoy, not about removing the service. And so I think that question was answered, but I'm not proposing that the service be removed, but rather that we seek some funding for it, because the job that we're doing is filling in a service that would normally be provided by the province. And my understanding is this is a province-wide issue, that the ambulances are not running the same response times as they used to, and so fire halls are picking up the difference. Mm-hmm. And some argue amongst the municipalities and the people who are elected that this is a downloading and that we should be fighting that downloading. So the issue is not the question of the service, it's questioning the funding. Where's the money coming from to help pay for it? At the moment, it's coming from our taxpayers, and I have a view that the province should be picking up some of that tab.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And
my question was, are we pursuing that? Because last year's budget, when I asked about it, the point was that we're kind of done. We're not really discussing it any further with the province as regards the service. But I wanted to know today whether we're still discussing the funding. And the answer, I think, was we may be able to pursue that still.
You know, that is a possibility. However, I still appreciate the public's comments that this service is valued, and that we should never look to not providing it because it provides a valuable service not only for our residents but for visitors to our community. CFO Creek.
Through the chair, so in regards to the revenue, so there are other municipalities in the same boat as Machosen, where their fire department's going and doing all the ambulance calls. There's actually a UBCM resolution this year requesting for funding from the province for supplies and the training involved. I don't know where that's gone, but I imagine it's being pushed forward. I think it was supported at the UBCM conference, and then we'll see what happens with the provincial level.
And I think
Councillor
those who've used ambulances know that you get a bill if you use the ambulance. So there's also funding that comes from the people who use the service. Well, that can be worked out. I did have a question for Mr. Creek. I missed it when I came back in. It was kind of interesting. I left and I realized when I went out of the room, I thought, oh, I guess we're not a properly constituted meeting once we're down to 2 people. So I apologize for not pointing that out. I guess maybe that discussion should happen another day. My question for Mr. Creek was on the 5-year plan. Last year we passed the 5-year plan, and subsequently you were able to provide us what the tax increases looked like for each year. And I think we're expecting 9.6% tax increase this year from last year's 5-year plan. And it would be helpful, I think, for us to know, and I realize the mill rates aren't there and all of that, but using the 2025 numbers, what would the tax increase look going out the out years of the 5 years here, as you're able to refine it, if that's possible.
But we haven't even talked about our capital costs yet.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't finished. So you asked a whole bunch of questions. We've got to come back with some of the operational questions. We haven't discussed the capital budget yet, so I think it's early to be talking about what the lift will be.
Yeah, just putting in my ask now, as I said, when it's possible and when it's appropriate. We didn't have it. You'll recall last year we voted on the budget without knowing the increases in the out years, and I think it's worth knowing that.
Okay. So any other questions from the public?
It's Mary Ballard, Machosen resident. I just have 2 things to say. So for the DCC, would that be something that we could put specifically towards like public service, policing, fire, public works, instead of parks per se?
Through chair? Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there is light industrial already in the OCP.
There's about almost a half a page. It's very minimal.
Right.
If you look in the OCP, you're right.
Right.
They're just a small amount.
Right. But it is in the OCP already, though, to have a light industrial within the community, so it wouldn't be going out of the realm of what supposedly all the residents want. So that was it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions from the public?
Sorry, in the OCD, to Ms. Ballard's point, it's section 9, and it does. The objective is to encourage industrial land uses that are not disruptive of the natural environment and rural character of the community. It's a very short section, but section 9. So. Oh, there you go. Cool.
Okay, and then we have correspondence from Ms. Bev Bacon on page 15 of the agenda as well, talking about home-based businesses and unreported property development and improvement. Okay. Councillor Gray.
Just in terms of that correspondence, is there any interest? I don't know. Nicole Shukin spoke at the last or recently about taking the roads back to becoming gravel roads. Bev Bacon is asking here about, should we reduce our budget and the roads, is there any point in modeling what these sorts of options would look like in terms of less maintenance on our roads? I'm not
CAO
suggesting it, I'm asking if it's worth doing.
CAO Payette, so the Councillor Gray has asked, can we do less maintenance on the roads? I think we can, but I think the question should be asked is, do we need to repave for roads that are pretty good that we could very well patch and seal? Is that what you're asking?
My question again was, is it worth modeling reduced maintenance on the roads?
Is it worth modeling reduce? What do you mean? Would you like to see less maintenance on the road, or what
No,
are
I'm
you asking?
responding to two constituents who've asked about the idea of doing less maintenance on the roads. One idea was to go back to remove the asphalt, and Ms. Bacon is asking about cuts in the roads budget, and I'm asking, is it worth modeling that? In other words, what happens if we do less maintenance on our roads? Does it become more expensive, less expensive? What goes on? I just don't know anything about that.
Okay.
And two people have raised it. It's come up before as well. And I'm curious if we should do anything. It's a question. I don't have an answer.
Okay.
I'd like to respond to the questions put to us by the constituents.
You've had a great deal of experience with roads. Can you give us your opinion of this?
Sure. Yeah, it's good. It's a great question. The district of Metchosin has maintained the roads at a very high standard. There's no doubt about that. And congratulations. And then the question is, when you drive around BC and you drive through other towns and you see that the roads are not as well maintained, what's the cost of that, right? Like, how does that roll out over the years? And I believe that's the question is, how much maintenance should you do each year versus the capital cost of repaving year over year? And that's why we have, road engineers that are fully employed just dealing with this question. And I believe that this might be, it would be timely to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money in that question. Obviously it's the residents are curious about this. And we now start to have to balance our level of service versus the amount of funding we have for facility replacement. I think it is timely, and it might be an interesting exercise to see what the difference would be for minimum, a little bit less maintenance versus the longer term costs for the capital resurfacing and replacement. I think that would be a good exercise. Can we do it before this budget? I'm not sure. But I think for sure in the next year, this is something maybe we should tackle from a strategic priority.
And through our capital projects, we will have a report come to council during the budgeting about which roads will be paved and maintained, that kind of thing. Yeah, 100% from the CFO. Okay. You want to come to the microphone? Yep. It's just.
When I spoke at the last budget meeting, I was saying that the depaving of roads, the return to gravel roads, is a fairly extreme movement afoot today. But what I was really advocating for was the narrowing of roads through line repainting of the sort that took place on Duke Road East.
I see. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Okay. Seeing there's no other comments, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Gray. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Thank you very much.